He walked into court with a smirk, his arm around the woman he replaced me with. To him, the divorce was just a victory lap, a final chance to humiliate the broke, useless wife he thought he was discarding. He mocked my clothes. He mocked my silence. He even whispered, "Don't worry, I'll send you transport money home." But when the judge opened the file from my late father's lawyers, a file I had never seen, the entire courtroom shifted. The smirk on his face fell first. Then his mistress's hand slowly slipped from his arm. Because inside that file was the truth. I wasn't broke. I was worth more than his entire family combined, and he was the last person on earth entitled to a single penny. That was the day the man who mocked me realized the divorce he celebrated was the biggest mistake of his life. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please, subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. Claire Morgan woke up to the sound of Ethan laughing downstairs. Not the warm laugh he used to have when they were newly married, but that sharp one he saved for his family when they were talking about her. She rolled out of bed, her chest tight in that familiar way. She had stopped wondering when the shift happened. Somewhere between her father's funeral and Ethan's first promotion, she became the person he could roll his eyes at without consequence. She tied her hair back and headed downstairs. Ethan and his mother, Grace, stood in the kitchen. Grace had a mug of coffee in her hand, and that tight smile she always wore around Claire. "You're up late," Ethan said, not looking at her. "Must be nice." Claire ignored the jab. "I didn't sleep well." Grace slid the mug forward on the counter like she expected Claire to clean it. "I'm not surprised. Disorganized sleeping habits usually come from not having any structure in your day." It was 7 in the morning. Claire worked part-time at a small accounting firm, but Grace liked to pretend she did nothing at all. Ethan didn't defend her. He never did. Grace turned to him like Claire wasn't even there. "I told you, Ethan, you married down. You need someone who can actually support your future, not this." Claire froze. She hadn't been meant to hear it. Grace's voice was sharp, but Ethan's reaction cut deeper. He laughed. Not a shocked laugh or a nervous one, a genuine, amused laugh. "Yeah," he said. Claire's stomach twisted. She stepped back before they noticed she'd been standing at the doorway. She didn't want them to see her break. In the bathroom upstairs, she gripped the sink and stared at her reflection. Her father used to tell her she was stronger than she looked. She never really believed it. After he died, she felt like she'd been made of thin glass. She took a breath, moved on autopilot, and got ready for work. By the time she returned, downstairs, Ethan and Grace had moved on to criticizing the neighbors and planning an early dinner at a restaurant she knew she wouldn't be invited to. Ethan tossed her a card before she left. "Your personal one. I paid for some stuff last night. Don't overspend again." She didn't argue. She should have checked it, but she had 5 minutes to make her bus. At work, her day slipped by quietly. Numbers made sense. People didn't. It wasn't until she tried to buy a small lunch at the cafe next door that the cashier frowned at her card. "It's declined." She tried again. Same result. By the time she came home that night, Ethan was scrolling on his phone, feet up on the coffee table. "My card was maxed," she said softly. He didn't look up. "Yeah, I told you not to be reckless." "I wasn't. You used it." He shrugged. "Same thing." She opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand. "Don't start. I'm stressed." She walked away before she said something she'd regret. The silence between them stretched until her phone buzzed. It was Lydia, her best friend. "Need to talk. It's about Ethan." Her heart thudded. She stepped into the bedroom and called. Lydia answered on the first ring, her voice shaky. "Claire, I didn't want to tell you. I figured maybe I was wrong and I didn't want you hurt. Claire sat on the edge of the bed. Tell me. I saw him months ago with a woman at a restaurant. They were close. Claire's breath caught. Why didn't you say something? Because you'd just lost your dad and you were barely staying afloat. I was scared it would break you. Claire closed her eyes. She wished Lydia had told her. She wished someone had warned her before everything got this far. Before Ethan started turning cold, then cruel, then careless. Do you know who she is? Claire asked. No, I didn't get a good look at her face. She looked polished. That's all I remember. Claire rubbed her forehead. Okay, thanks. Claire, Lydia said quietly, I think things are going to get worse before they get better. Just be careful. After the call, Claire sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about the last few months. The late nights, the sudden gym trips, the phone always flipped face down. For a while she convinced herself he was going through stress or burnout or anything but another woman. She wasn't naive, just tired. The next morning, Grace showed up without warning. She walked straight into the living room and handed Claire a stack of papers. Sign these. Claire looked down at the document. What is this? A post-marital financial agreement, Grace said. It protects Ethan's future. Don't overthink it. Just sign. Claire scanned the words. Everything in the contract favored Ethan. If they ever separated, she would get nothing. No rights to their assets, no spousal support, nothing. Why would I sign this? Claire asked. Grace blinked slowly. Because it's the right thing to do. Ethan has a future, a career, and you're Claire. Claire set the papers on the table. No. No? Grace repeated, as if she'd never heard the word in her life. No, Claire said again. I'm not signing it. Grace's eyes narrowed. Don't start thinking you're someone you're not. Ethan married you because he felt sorry for you after your father died. If you push this, you'll prove everybody right. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She just stared until Grace stepped back, offended. Fine, Grace said, grabbing her purse. Have it your way. I hope you know what you're risking. When she left, Claire finally let her shoulders sag. That night, Ethan came home late. The house smelled like a woman's perfume he never wore. He walked right past Claire, took a shower without saying a word, and fell asleep with his phone under his pillow. Claire lay awake beside him, thinking about the woman at the restaurant, thinking about how easily Ethan's family stepped over her like she wasn't even a person. The next few days crawled. Ethan grew more distant. Claire grew more aware. Every time he walked out the door, she wondered who he was really going to see. On Friday, the answer finally arrived. Claire came home early because her boss let everyone leave before a storm rolled in. She parked outside and saw Ethan's car already there. She smiled a little, thinking maybe he'd taken the day off. The smile vanished as soon as she opened the front door. Laughter drifted from the kitchen, a woman's laughter, high and sugary. Claire stepped forward slowly. Her hand shook when she gripped the doorway. Ethan stood shirtless at the counter. A woman sat on the island, her legs crossed, her dress hitched up like she had no plans to leave anytime soon. The woman turned to Claire and smirked. Hi, sweetheart. Claire's throat closed. Ethan didn't even look guilty. You're home early. Claire stared at him. Who is she? The woman slid off the counter with practiced ease. Melanie, she said. I'm the one he actually wants. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Melanie walked right up to Claire, eyes cold. You were just the placeholder wife, the quiet one, the one who didn't know her role. Claire stepped back, stomach lodged in her throat. Her heart hurt in a way that wasn't physical, but still made her chest feel bruised. Get out, Claire whispered. Melanie laughed. Of your house or your marriage? Because trust me, one of those already happened. Ethan didn't tell Melanie to stop. He didn't defend Claire. He didn't look sorry. That silence was the moment Claire finally broke. She grabbed her bag and walked out the door, because if she stayed one more second, she would fall apart. She sat in her car for a long time. Rain hit the windshield, blurring everything. Her breathing felt thin. She could hear her father's voice somewhere in her memory, telling her she didn't deserve people who played with her heart like it was disposable. When she finally went back inside later, Melanie was gone. Ethan was sitting on the couch like nothing had happened. "We need to talk," he said. Claire stood by the doorway and waited. He rubbed his hands together, excited, actually excited. "I'm filing for divorce." Her breath lifted, then dropped like a stone. He kept going. "I already hired a lawyer. It's done." Claire blinked. "You already hired a lawyer?" "Yeah," he said, 2 weeks ago." She stared at him, stunned. 2 weeks ago? You planned this? Ethan shrugged. "It was inevitable." She felt the floor tilt under her. "Ethan, You won't fight me," he cut in. "You can't afford to." The words hit her harder than Melanie's insults. He leaned back with a satisfied grin. "Look, I'll even be nice about it. I'll send you transport money home after the hearing." Her chest tightened. "What did you do with our joint account?" "Used it," he said simply. She grabbed her phone and checked her banking app. The balance was 0, completely drained. Her throat burned. "That money was for bills." "And I handled it," Ethan said. "Relax." She didn't speak. She couldn't. All the anger, hurt, betrayal churned inside her like a storm. Ethan stood and stretched. "Anyway, big day tomorrow. Paperwork starts. Try not to embarrass yourself." He walked upstairs without another word. Claire stood frozen in the quiet, her hands shaking. A knock sounded at the door. She jumped. She opened it slowly. A courier stood there holding a cream-colored envelope with an embossed seal she recognized instantly. Her father's law firm. "Delivery for Claire Morgan," he said. She took it with shaky hands. As soon as he left, she closed the door and stared at the envelope. Her heart pounded. She sat on the couch, tore the seal, and pulled out the letter. The words blurred as she read. "You are requested to appear for pending matters regarding your inheritance." Her inheritance. The one no one ever talked about. The one she never knew details about. Her hands trembled as she kept reading, but the words swam. She looked up, breath thin, the room spinning as everything she thought she knew about her father, her marriage, her future shifted under her feet. Claire stared at the letter, her hand still hovering in the air like she wasn't sure she'd actually opened it. The storm outside cracked with sudden thunder, rattling the windows, but she barely heard it. All she could hear was the pounding in her chest and the echo of Ethan's voice upstairs as he hummed to himself, completely unbothered by the wreckage he'd left behind. She forced herself to read the letter again, slower this time, her eyes tracing each line like it might disappear if she blinked too fast. "You are requested to appear for pending matters regarding your inheritance." Her inheritance. Something she hadn't thought about in months. Something that had always been wrapped in mystery. Her father never explained anything before he died. He always said, "When the time is right." Then the heart attack came, and the time never arrived. She sank onto the couch, gripping the edge of the paper until it crinkled. The letter felt heavier than it should, heavy with things she didn't understand, heavy with the weight of a life she never truly stepped into. Her phone buzzed. She flinched. It was Lydia. "Hey, are you home? Need to talk." Claire didn't want to talk. She didn't want anyone to see her like this. But Lydia knew her too well. If Claire didn't answer, Lydia would drive over. She typed back, "I'm home." 5 minutes later, a soft knock came at the door. Claire opened it, and Lydia stepped in without waiting, her eyes scanning Claire's face. "You look pale," she whispered. "Did something happen?" Claire handed her the letter. Lydia scanned it fast, her eyebrows lifting. "Your father's lawyers? Now? Claire, this could be important." "I don't know what it means," Claire said, her voice thin. Lydia sat beside her. "Your dad had a huge business. There must have been something left behind." "He never told me anything," Claire said. "He always said we'd talk later, and we never did." Lydia placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe this is your chance to finally know." Claire wanted to believe that, but her mind felt scattered, pulled in too many directions. The betrayal, the affair, the divorce, the account being drained, Grace walking into her house with documents Claire was supposed to sign like a servant. Melanie standing in her kitchen like she owned it. She felt like she had been shoved under water and left there. Lydia hesitated, then asked in a quiet voice, "Is Ethan still here?" "Upstairs." "Does he know about the letter?" "No." "Don't tell him," Lydia said quickly. "Not yet. Not until you know what you're dealing with." Claire didn't plan on it. She didn't know why, but a part of her understood instinctively that this letter wasn't something to share. Not with Ethan. Not with anyone from the Hale family. Lydia stayed a little longer, talking softly, trying to keep Claire grounded. But Claire kept drifting, her mind circling the same questions. Why now? Why after months of silence from the firm? Why after Ethan decided to throw her away? When Lydia finally hugged her goodbye and left, Claire locked the door and leaned against it. The house felt different now, still broken, still heavy, but the air held something else too, something she couldn't name. Upstairs, she could hear Ethan moving around. His footsteps had that careless stomp he used when he thought he owned everything under this roof. Claire walked into their bedroom. Ethan stood at the dresser, buttoning his shirt. He looked up at her like she was a stranger who'd walked into the wrong space. "Why are you staring?" he asked. She swallowed. "I need to ask you something." He raised an eyebrow. "Make it quick." "How long?" she whispered. "How long were you planning this? The divorce?" He smirked. "I told you. It was inevitable." "You hired a lawyer 2 weeks ago." "Yeah, so?" "So you were cheating on me while planning to leave," she said softly. Ethan rolled his eyes. "This again. Look, you're overreacting. Everyone cheats once in a while. It's not the end of the world." Claire felt her throat close. "You let her in our home." He shrugged. "It won't be your home for long." Her breath caught. He said it with no hesitation, no regret, just certainty. Ethan grabbed his watch, strapped it on, and walked past her. "Anyway, I'm heading out. Try not to do anything dramatic. Judges hate drama." He brushed her shoulder on the way out, like she was an object in his path. The front door closed a second later. Claire stood still for a long time, staring at nothing, her eyes hot but dry. Something inside her was hollowing itself out, making space for something else she couldn't name yet. Not anger, not grief, something sharper. She looked at the letter again. "Pending matters regarding your inheritance." She whispered the words under her breath. They didn't sound real. She took the letter to the kitchen table, sat down, and reread every line, every sentence. At the bottom, a date and time were printed. Her meeting was scheduled in 2 days. She exhaled, slowly. 2 days. 2 days until she walked into a part of her life she never knew existed. 2 days until she learned if her father left her something or nothing at all. For the first time in months, she felt a thin thread of purpose pulling her forward. That night, she barely slept. Ethan didn't come home. She didn't bother texting him. When morning light crept into the bedroom, her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. At work, she moved through tasks like a ghost, Every number she typed blurred, every voice sounded far away. Her boss asked if she was okay. She lied and said she was fine. She wasn't. When she got home, Ethan's shoes were by the door. Melanie's perfume hung in the air. She didn't go looking for either of them. She went straight to the bedroom, pulled out an old storage box from the closet, and dug through her father's things. She found old files, old photos, handwritten notes. She thought maybe, somewhere, she'd find clues to what the lawyers wanted. Nothing. Not a hint. Her phone buzzed again. It was Lydia. "Let me know how the letter thing goes. I'm worried about you." Claire stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "I will." That night, Ethan confronted her again. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking annoyed. "You've been quiet," he said. "I'm tired." "Well, don't get too comfortable," he said. "My lawyer sent over the first draft of the divorce documents. You're signing them tomorrow." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not signing anything until I look it over." Ethan laughed. "You don't have the money for a lawyer, Claire. You're stalling." "I'm thinking," she said. "Don't think. Just sign." He walked away without waiting for an answer. Later, when the house was silent, Claire sat on the edge of the bed holding the letter again. She traced the embossed seal with her thumb, memorizing the shape. Her father's attorneys had always been rigid, formal, distant. If they were reaching out now, it had to mean something big, something he'd planned long before Ethan ever stepped into her life. Part of her wondered, had her father known? Had he seen through Ethan in ways she refused to? The thought hurt. It also steadied her. The night passed slowly. When the sky finally lightened, she got dressed and took the bus across town to the firm's building. The city moved around her in its usual rush, but she felt like she was walking underwater. Inside the lobby, the receptionist greeted her. "Claire Morgan?" She nodded. "Please have a seat. They've been expecting you." Claire swallowed. "Expecting me?" "Yes," the receptionist said with a small smile. "For quite some time." Claire's heart stumbled. She sat in the chair, her hands folded in her lap, her breath shallow. After a few minutes, a door opened and a tall man in a gray suit stepped out. "Mrs. Morgan, I'm Henry Wallace, your father's estate attorney. Please come in." Claire followed him down a quiet hallway and into a polished conference room. A folder sat on the table, the same embossed seal, the same weight of unanswered questions. Henry motioned for her to sit. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," he said gently. "Your father left instructions we were not allowed to reveal until now." Claire's fingers curled around the arms of the chair. "Why now?" Henry hesitated. "Because your marriage is ending." Her breath hitched. You knew?" "We were instructed to monitor the situation," he said. "Your father foresaw certain possibilities." She stared at him, barely breathing. What did he foresee? Henry placed the folder in front of her. "Mrs. Morgan," he said quietly, "what is inside this file is the beginning of everything your father wanted you to know." Her heartbeat roared in her ears. He slid the folder closer. "This," he said, "concerns the inheritance you were never told about." Claire stared at it, her hand trembling as she reached for the cover. And that was when everything in her life, already broken and bruised and scattered, shifted one more time. Because as she opened the folder, she realized this wasn't just paperwork. It was a doorway. And whatever waited on the other side was about to change everything. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and how did this story speak to you? Claire left the law firm that day with the folder still unopened. Henry had insisted she take it home, look through it slowly, and return in 2 days for a full explanation. But as she walked down the steps and into the afternoon light, the folder felt like it weighed more than her whole life. By the time she reached her house, Ethan's car was in the driveway. Her breath tightened. She wanted to turn around and keep walking, but she forced herself to unlock the door. Ethan was sitting on the couch like he owned the place, flipping through channels. "What are you doing here?" Claire asked. He looked at her briefly. "Relax. I came for some things." His tone made it clear he wasn't asking permission. She set the folder on the counter, keeping her hand on it. She didn't trust him with anything that had her father's name on it. Ethan lifted his feet onto the table. "You look stressed. Don't tell me you actually thought I was coming home." "I didn't," she said. "Good," he replied. "I moved my stuff out this morning." There was no sadness in his voice, not even nostalgia, just a casual tone like he was talking about cleaning out an old locker. "Melanie's helping me decorate the new place," he added. Claire swallowed. "Then why are you here?" He smirked. "Because I felt like it." A minute later, the front door swung open again, and Melanie walked in like she lived there. She didn't even glance at Claire before she wrapped her arms around Ethan from behind and kissed his neck. Claire's stomach twisted, but she didn't speak. She refused to give either of them the satisfaction. Melanie looked around and laughed. "This place is depressing. No wonder he got bored." Ethan didn't disagree. He didn't even look at Claire. He stood, grabbed his bag, and walked past her. "Don't break anything while I'm gone," he said. Melanie winked at Claire on the way out. "You should take up a hobby. Staying married clearly wasn't working for you." The door shut behind them. Claire stood in the hallway, body shaking, rage and humiliation burning in her chest. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the mockery, the casual cruelty, the way they walked through her home as if she were the stranger and they were the rightful owners. She leaned on the counter and tried to breathe. It took minutes for her chest to stop tightening. Later that night, as she sat on the couch staring at the unopened folder, her phone buzzed. "Lydia. Call me when you can." Claire didn't want to talk, but she also didn't want to sit in silence with her thoughts. She called. Lydia answered instantly. "Claire, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." Claire closed her eyes. "Just say it." "I found Melanie's social media," Lydia said. "They've been together for over a year." Claire froze. "A year?" "At least," Lydia whispered. "There are pictures, posts, captions. They didn't tag each other, but they kept liking each other's stuff. Then I found one photo from 11 months ago. Her bracelet was the same one I saw at the restaurant that night." Claire pressed a hand to her forehead. 11 months, almost a year of lies, a year of her sleeping beside Ethan while he whispered things to someone else. Lydia kept talking softly. "Claire, I don't think the affair was new. I think it was planned." Claire felt something break quietly inside her. "And that's not all," Lydia said. "I heard from my cousin. He works with someone who knows Ethan's co-workers. Apparently, Ethan's been bragging." Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "Bragging about what?" "That he's trading up after the divorce, that he deserves someone better, that he's done carrying a wife who brings nothing to the table." Claire shut her eyes. The humiliation hit harder than a punch. She pictured Ethan laughing with co-workers, making jokes about her as if she were nothing but a placeholder, just like Melanie said. Lydia's voice softened. "I'm so sorry." Claire swallowed the burning in her throat. "Thank you for telling me." They hung up. Claire sat still for a long time, her heart hollowing out with every passing second. She used to think the worst part was the cheating. Now she realized it wasn't. It was the way Ethan erased her in private and in public, reducing her to something disposable. The next morning, her boss called her into the office. "We're cutting your hours," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Budget changes." Claire nodded quietly. "I understand." But she didn't. Not really. She relied on that income. She needed it now more than ever. When she left work, she sat on a bench outside, staring at her phone. She had no one else to call, no one else to lean on. Lydia tried, but Lydia had her own life. Claire felt like she was drowning, alone. By the time she returned home, a legal envelope was taped to her door. Ethan Hale versus Claire Morgan. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Inside was a motion filed by Ethan's attorney claiming she had little to no income, no assets, and therefore should receive the absolute minimal settlement permissible by law. Claire felt her blood boil. The ink on her reduced hours notice wasn't even dry. Grace's fingerprints were all over this. Claire could practically hear her voice. "She has nothing. Make sure she leaves with nothing." Claire stared at the motion until her vision blurred. She knew now. Ethan didn't wake up one day and decide to divorce her. He had been preparing, planning, coordinating with his mother. The post-marital agreement Grace tried to force on her suddenly made perfect sense. They were setting the stage months ago. Claire paced the living room, forcing air into her lungs. She needed answers. She needed something from her father's folder to make sense, something to hold on to. But the pages inside were filled with business memos, trust summaries, and signatures she didn't recognize. Her father had built an empire, but he never talked about it. Not at home, not with her, not even when he was dying. She flipped through document after document, searching for anything simple, anything human, anything that explained the distance he kept those last few years. But all she found were reminders that she'd never understood the world he lived in. A world that had rules and secrets and expectations she was now walking into blind. That night, Ethan showed up again. He stood in the doorway with a smug look, holding a thin envelope. "Here," he said, "a settlement. Fair enough, considering what you bring to the table." Claire opened it. The settlement said she would leave with nothing. No savings, no car, not even furniture. She would walk away empty-handed. "You think I'm signing this?" she asked quietly. Ethan snorted. "Claire, you can't even hire a lawyer. Just sign it and save yourself the embarrassment." She stared at him, stunned by the confidence in his voice. He leaned against the doorframe. "Tell you what, on divorce day, I'll even pay for your bus ride home. You know, out of pity." Her hands curled into fists. Ethan grinned at her reaction. "See? I knew you'd take it that way. You're too emotional. Always have been." He set the papers on the table. "Sign them by tomorrow." He left without another word. Claire sank into the chair and tried not to cry. Everything in her life was unraveling at once. Her job, her marriage, her dignity, her father's secrets. The account drained, the house no longer feeling like hers. Melanie's perfume still lingering in the air. She barely slept. At dawn, she forced herself out of bed and rode the bus to her father's law firm. She needed clarity, answers, something to pull her out of the freefall she was in. But when she stepped inside, Henry Wallace met her with a troubled expression. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, "we need to talk about something unexpected." Her stomach twisted. "What is it?" He motioned for her to follow him into the conference room. She sat down, hands tight in her lap. Henry sighed. "We cannot proceed today." Claire blinked. "Why?" "Because your husband's family," he said carefully, "has filed a request to investigate your finances." Claire felt like someone had punched her in the chest. "What finances? I don't have anything." Henry nodded grimly. "Which is why this is concerning. They seem to believe you're hiding money." Claire's voice cracked. "I'm not." "I believe you," he said. "But until the court reviews their request, I am legally restricted from revealing anything stored in your father's file." Claire's throat tightened. "So you can't tell me anything?" "Not yet." Her pulse thudded in her ears. How long? Until the day of the divorce hearing, Henry said quietly. Your father left a file that cannot be opened until then. Claire sat frozen, the room fading around her. Henry's words echoed again and again in her mind. A file your father left cannot be opened until the day of the divorce hearing. Every fear she'd been trying not to name rose at once. Her father had hidden something big, something he didn't trust anyone with until now. And Ethan's family was clawing at it like a pack of wolves. She swallowed hard. Ethan thinks I'm hiding money, she whispered. Henry folded his hands. Yes, and the request came from his mother as well. Her signature is on the petition. Grace, of course. Claire rubbed her forehead, trying to make sense of the madness. Why would they think I'm hiding anything? I barely have money for groceries. The bank account is empty. They drained it. Henry watched her for a moment. This may feel overwhelming, but you need to stay calm. Do not sign any documents Ethan gives you. Do not allow him to pressure you. And do not, under any circumstance, show him anything from your father's folder. Claire nodded stiffly. Her throat felt tight. I won't. I promise. Henry's voice softened. I know this is difficult, but you're closer to the truth than you think. The truth. Those words felt heavy, heavy enough to sink her. He stood and walked her to the hallway. We will contact you as soon as the court clears us to proceed. Until then, stay cautious. Claire stepped outside, blinking against the daylight. The city noise swirled around her, but everything felt muted. She wrapped her arms around herself and walked to the bus stop slowly, feeling each step like she was dragging a weight behind her. People passed by, talking, laughing, arguing, living in their own worlds. She felt invisible. On the bus ride home, she replayed everything in her head. Ethan moving out, Melanie taunting her, the affair stretching back a year, Grace pushing financial documents at her, Ethan bragging about trading up, her job cutting hours, the bank account drained, and now this, Grace filing to investigate her finances for money she didn't have. She didn't know what her father had left behind, but she could feel one truth settling deeper by the minute. They were after something they thought belonged to them, something they were desperate to find. When she reached her house, Ethan's car was parked in the driveway again. Her heart sank. She considered walking past the house and circling the block until he left, but she was too drained. She walked inside. Ethan stood in the living room with his arms crossed, tapping his foot like he'd been waiting. Where were you? He demanded. Claire shut the door behind her. Out. Out where? His jaw clenched. My mother said you went somewhere downtown. Claire's pulse jumped. Grace had someone watching her? Or she'd driven past at the wrong time? Either way, Claire refused to give Ethan anything. I had errands, she said. Don't lie to me, Claire. I'm not lying. Ethan stepped closer, invading her space. You're hiding something, and you're terrible at it. Claire steadied herself. I'm not hiding anything. He laughed, a quick, sharp sound. My mother says otherwise. She thinks you're up to something, and honestly, I agree. Claire met his eyes. Why would I hide anything? You took everything from me already. That's what I used to think, Ethan said, but now I'm not so sure. He circled her like he was inspecting something fragile. You've been acting strange, quiet, walking around with that stupid folder your dad left you. You forget I know you, Claire. I know when you're scared. I'm not scared, she whispered. Oh, you are, he said, and you're terrible at pretending you're not. She stepped back. I want you to leave. Ethan smiled coldly. This is still my house. It won't be forever. His eyes narrowed. Fine, but before I go, I'm going to say this once. If you're hiding anything, even a cent, the judge will find out, and I'll make sure I get my share." He grabbed his keys, shot her one last look, and walked out. The door slammed behind him, echoing through the house. Claire leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking again. She hated how easily Ethan could rattle her, how he knew exactly where to push. She made tea she didn't drink, sat at the table she barely felt connected to anymore, and stared at the folder. She still hadn't opened all of it. She didn't know if she could. What if the truth inside it wasn't good? What if it hurt more than it helped? Her father had always been distant, even before he got sick. Long work trips, closed-door meetings, private calls he never explained. When she was a child, he'd come home late, smelling like coffee and stress, offering a gentle kiss on the forehead, but little else. She'd wanted more from him, but she never got it. Then he got sick, and the distance felt permanent. She thought she'd never understand him. Now, she wasn't sure she ever would. She opened the folder again, flipping through the papers. Financial breakdowns, corporate structures, shares she didn't remember hearing about. And tucked between them, a note in his handwriting. She knew the slanted letters instantly. "Keep your eyes open. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend." Her heart twisted. Was he talking about Ethan? Grace? Someone else entirely? She didn't know, and she hated that she didn't know. Her phone buzzed. Lydia again. "Call me, please." Claire answered. Lydia didn't waste time. "Claire, are you okay? You sound off." "I'm fine," Claire said automatically. "No, you're not," Lydia hesitated. "Listen, I need to tell you something else, and it's about Grace." Claire straightened. "What about her?" "I heard from my cousin that she's been talking to people for months, asking questions about you, about your dad's company, about whether he left you anything." Claire felt her stomach drop. "She never asked me." "She didn't want you to know," Lydia said quietly. "Claire, she was preparing for Ethan to leave you way before he did." Claire gripped the phone. "Why? For what?" Lydia sighed. "She doesn't think you're good enough. She never did. She wanted Ethan with someone bigger, someone with money, someone useful." Useful. That word hit like a slap. Claire closed her eyes, remembering Grace's voice that morning in the kitchen. "You married down." Lydia continued. "I think she thought you had an inheritance hidden somewhere. She probably thought Ethan could take half if he divorced you." Claire's throat tightened. "But I didn't even know about any inheritance." "I know," Lydia said, "but she doesn't care about the truth. She cares about what she can grab." Claire hung up feeling colder than before. Grace wasn't just cruel, she was calculating. She'd been circling Claire like a hawk, waiting for something valuable to drop. Claire set her phone down and stood at the window, staring at the empty driveway. Evening shadows stretched across the lawn, making the house feel bigger and quieter than usual. She pressed her hand to the glass and let the silence settle around her. She knew what she had to do. She grabbed her bag, the folder, and walked out the door before she could talk herself out of it. Claire woke the next morning feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Her eyes burned, her head throbbed, but she forced herself to sit up. She needed to figure out her life before Ethan and Grace tore the last pieces apart. Her phone buzzed almost immediately, a number she didn't recognize. She let it ring twice before answering. "Claire Morgan?" a sharp female voice asked. "Yes?" "This is Diane Marks. I represent your husband." Claire's stomach tightened. Ethan's lawyer. "I'm calling," Diane continued, "to remind you that you are expected to sign the settlement documents within 48 hours. Failure to do so will result in additional motions being filed against you." Claire pressed her fingers to her temple. "I haven't had time to review." "You don't need time," Diane cut in. "You have no income, no assets, and no legal counsel. This is your best option." Claire felt her cheeks heat. I'm not signing anything without understanding it. Well, Diane said, her tone clipped, you have 2 days to come to terms with the inevitable. The line clicked dead. Claire stared at her phone, her pulse pounding. Ethan had chosen a lawyer who sounded like she enjoyed stepping on people. Claire couldn't even afford 15 minutes of legal advice. She felt cornered. She spent the next hour pacing the kitchen, clutching her phone, debating whether to call Lydia. But Lydia had been acting strange lately, quieter, shorter texts, long delays in responses. Claire didn't have the energy to decode her friend's distance. Still, she tried. Can we talk? She texted. Lydia responded 10 minutes later. Busy. Later? Claire stared at the message, feeling the starting ache of being abandoned even by the one person who always stood in her corner. She told herself Lydia was just having a hard week, but the timing hurt. By mid-afternoon, Grace texted her, "Be ready at 6, family dinner. Everyone will be there. You should show your face." Claire almost laughed. Grace inviting her to dinner was like a wolf inviting a lamb to a barbecue. But she also felt a strange pull. If she didn't go, Grace would twist the story. If she did go, maybe she'd get answers. At 6, she stood outside the Hale family's door with her heart sinking. She could already hear the chatter and laughter inside. She knocked once. Grace opened the door with a bright, fake smile. "Claire, you came!" Claire forced a nod. "Come in," Grace said loudly, "though it's only out of pity I invited you." Claire stiffened. She should have turned around then. Inside, everyone looked up. Ethan sat at the far end of the long dining table. Melanie sat right. Beside him, her hand resting casually on his arm like she owned him. The sight made Claire's stomach twist. Grace motioned toward an empty seat, far from Ethan. "Sit." Claire sat quietly, focusing on her breathing. The family conversation flowed around her like she wasn't there. Grace kept shooting her tight smiles, as if she were waiting for Claire to crumble. Melanie giggled at something Ethan whispered in her ear. Then Grace stood, tapping a spoon on a glass. "Everyone, I have a little announcement." Claire froze. Grace smiled wide. "Ethan and Claire are officially divorcing, and we support Ethan fully in moving on with his life." The table erupted into cheers and murmured congratulations. Melanie looked pleased with herself. Ethan raised his glass. Claire sat stiff, feeling her face heat, her throat close. Her humiliation felt thick, like a blanket suffocating her. Melanie leaned over the table. "Don't worry, Claire. I'll take good care of him." Claire wanted to leave, but her legs wouldn't move. Ethan added with a smirk, "Maybe we should pass around a hat. Claire might need donations for rent soon." Laughter broke out. Claire's hands shook under the table. Her vision blurred. She felt small, smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. She couldn't even look at Ethan. The man she once loved sat beside another woman, laughing at her like she was a joke. She stood abruptly. "I need to go." Grace's smile sharpened. "Of course you do." Claire didn't look back. She walked out into the cold evening, her face burning, her eyes filling. She made it halfway down the street before the tears finally fell. The next morning, things got worse. Her landlord knocked on her door, frowning. "Claire, I need the rent. It's 3 days late." Claire's chest tightened. "I know. I'm waiting on—" "Look, I like you," he said, "but if you can't pay by Friday, I'll have to start the eviction process." Eviction. Her body went cold. "I'll find a way," she whispered. He nodded but didn't look convinced. When he left, Claire sat on the floor for a long time, staring at the blank wall. She felt like her entire world was one step from collapsing. She finally grabbed her phone to call Ethan, even though she hated herself for it. When he didn't pick up, she called again, and again. On the 4th call, her screen flashed. "This number has been blocked." Claire stared at it, numb. He had blocked her, his wife, the woman he'd spent years with, the same woman whose life he was ripping apart piece by piece. Her hand shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. She needed someone to talk to. She grabbed her jacket and walked toward Lydia's apartment, needing to feel like she still had one person who hadn't turned their back on her. But halfway there, she heard something that made her stop. Lydia's voice, right around the corner. "I didn't want her to find out like this," Lydia said, frustrated. "I know, okay? I know, but I can't keep it from her forever." Claire froze behind the wall, her heart pounding. Who was she talking to? Why did it sound like a secret? Claire stepped back quietly, her breath thin. She didn't confront Lydia. She couldn't. Not right then. Her chest already felt cracked open. Instead, she went home. She curled up on the couch, pulling a blanket around her, trying to breathe through the ache. The betrayal she felt was no longer contained in one area of her life. It was spreading like a slow poison. Later that night, she finally gathered enough courage to confront part of her past. She dug through her father's documents, searching for answers. But nothing gave her what she needed. Frustrated, she called her father's old business partner, Arthur Dean. He had been close to her, father, closer than anyone after her mother died. When he answered, his voice sounded worn, older than she remembered. "Arthur, it's Claire." Her voice shook. "I need to ask you something about my father." Arthur didn't hesitate. "Claire, of course. Come by tomorrow. We'll talk." The next day, Claire sat in Arthur's office, feeling like she'd stepped into a room of memories. Arthur watched her closely. "Your father cared about you deeply," he said quietly, even if he struggled to show it. Claire's throat tightened. "Then why all the secrets?" Arthur sighed. "He was planning to rewrite his will before he died. He wanted to make sure you would be protected, but someone interfered before he could finish." Claire's breath hitched. "Interfered? How?" "I can't say," Arthur murmured, "but he left a sealed clause, something he didn't trust anyone else with, something he wanted revealed only when you needed it most." Claire sat still, her heart pounding. "What does the clause say?" Arthur shook his head. "I don't know the exact details. Your father kept it locked away. He said it had to do with your future." Claire felt a wave of fear wash over her. She had spent so long trying to move on from her father's distance, but now it felt like he'd been guiding something she couldn't yet see. She left the office feeling heavier, but also strangely connected to the past she had tried so hard to bury. That night, everything came crashing down at once. She sat alone in the living room, holding an old photo of her father, crying quietly. She admitted to herself what she had never wanted to say out loud. She married Ethan because she was lonely, because after her father died, she couldn't stand the silence in her own home. She wanted someone to fill the space, someone to make the world feel less empty. She mistook proximity for love. She mistook attention for affection. She mistook kindness for commitment. She felt stupid, invisible, like every mistake she'd made was catching up to her at once. When the tears finally stopped, she felt hollow. Hours later, a frantic knock jolted her upright. She opened the door to find Lydia standing there, tear-streaked, trembling, holding a thin envelope. "Claire," she whispered, breathless, "you need to see this." Claire frowned. "Lydia, what's wrong?" "It's from Grace," Lydia said, voice cracking. "She sent it to me thinking I'd convince you to give up. I didn't want to show you, but you need to know." Claire took the envelope with shaking hands and pulled out the document. Her eyes widened as she read. It stated that Claire was never meant to access her inheritance until her marriage ended. She looked up, stunned, her voice barely a whisper. "Lydia, what is this?" Lydia covered her mouth, tears falling. "Claire, they knew. Grace knew. Maybe Ethan too. They've been planning this for years." Claire stared at the document, her fingers trembling so hard the paper shook. Her eyes ran over the words again and again, but her brain refused to understand them. It felt unreal, impossible, like she had stepped into someone else's nightmare. "You're saying," Claire swallowed hard, "my father set it up so I wouldn't receive anything until my marriage ended?" Lydia nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Yes, but why would he—" Claire's voice cracked. She couldn't finish the sentence. She couldn't even think clearly. Her thoughts were fighting each other, tumbling over themselves, crashing into every unanswered question she'd buried for years. Lydia stepped closer, voice shaking. "Claire?" Grace knew. "I don't know how, I don't know when, but she did. She's been trying to get that money into Ethan's hands." Claire shook her head slowly. No, this doesn't make sense. How could she even—" "Read the bottom," Lydia whispered. Claire forced her eyes down the page. There, in small printed text, was a notation. "Beneficiary access contingent upon marital dissolution." Her stomach twisted. She felt like the floor dropped from under her. "This can't be real," Claire whispered. "It is," Lydia said. "Grace sent it to me because she thought I would convince you to sign the settlement quickly. She said you were holding Ethan back from his future wealth and needed a push." Claire pressed a hand to her chest. The air felt thin. "She said that to you?" "Yes," Lydia said. "And Claire, she said she's been waiting for this divorce for a long time, that she's been patient with your situation." Claire stumbled back a step, hitting the wall behind her, waiting, planning, watching her like a spider watches its prey. Lydia reached out, gripping her arms. "Claire, listen to me. This isn't about your marriage failing. They've been setting this up for years. They wanted you out. They wanted whatever your father left you, and they won't stop." Claire felt sick. Her mind spun with memories she never questioned before. Grace's constant pressure, her pushing financial documents at her, her mentioning protecting Ethan's future, her strange comments about Claire's father, her sudden interest in Claire's schedule, her coldness, her smug confidence during the divorce announcement. It all lined up now. Every moment, every whisper, every fake smile. Her throat tightened painfully. "Ethan knew," she whispered, "or at least he suspected." Lydia didn't speak, which was answer enough. Claire felt her knees buckle. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. Tears blurred her vision, but this time they didn't fall easily. They burned, gathering heavy behind her eyes like smoke with nowhere to go. She looked up at Lydia through the haze, her voice barely holding together. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why didn't you warn me?" Lydia's face crumpled. "Because I didn't know until this week, I swear, and I should have told you as soon as I got the envelope, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you more." Claire felt the sting of those words. She believed Lydia, but it didn't dull the ache. "They knew," Claire said, almost choking on the words. "They've been planning this, all of it, years." Lydia nodded slowly, tears streaming. She squeezed Claire's hand, her voice breaking as she whispered the truth Claire wasn't ready for. Claire barely slept the night before the hearing. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying everything she had learned. Grace knowing about the inheritance clause, Ethan circling her like a predator, pretending he knew her fears better than she did. The file her father left, sealed for years, locked until this exact moment. The truth was waiting at the courthouse, and for the first time since her father died, Claire wasn't scared of it. She got dressed quietly, choosing the simplest outfit she owned. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just enough to show she wasn't broken. She took the bus even though her stomach twisted the whole ride. Every bump in the road reminded her how far she had fallen. When she stepped off the bus and saw the courthouse steps ahead, her heartbeat quickened. She expected to feel small, but instead she felt strangely steady, as if the air itself had shifted. She walked inside. Ethan was already there. He stood near the entrance with Melanie on his arm, both of them dressed like they were attending a celebration, not a divorce hearing. Melanie wore a smug smile, whispering something into Ethan's ear. He laughed loudly, the sound echoing down the hallway. He turned and spotted Claire. His grin widened. "Well, well," he said, stepping forward. "You made it. I was worried you'd be too embarrassed to show your face." Claire didn't react. She walked past him, ignoring the way Melanie snickered behind her. "Hold on," Ethan said, leaning close enough that she could smell his cologne. "You look a little tense. Don't worry. I'll give you a ride home after this. You know, if you can't afford one." Claire's jaw tightened. "Move." Ethan smirked. "Still feisty. I like that." Melanie tugged his arm. "Leave her. She's not worth it." Ethan nodded. "You're right. She never was." Claire didn't flinch. She walked into the courtroom and found a seat near the front. Her hands trembled, but her breathing stayed controlled. She was alone. No Lydia beside her. No friends. No family. She felt the loneliness, but she also felt something sharper underneath it. Resolve. Ethan and Melanie took their seats behind her, talking loudly on purpose. Every few minutes, Melanie let out a soft, mocking giggle. Claire focused on the judge's bench, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. A moment later, the door at the side of the courtroom opened. Henry Wallace stepped in with 2 other attorneys. Claire felt her muscles loosen a bit. She wasn't alone after all. Henry approached her quietly. "Claire, are you all right?" "Yes," she said, and for once she meant it. He nodded. "We are prepared. Everything will be handled. Just breathe." Ethan scoffed behind them. "Really? You brought backup?" he mocked. "What, are you going to pretend you're some kind of heiress now?" Melanie laughed immediately. "Please, she could barely pay rent." Henry didn't even turn around. He simply said, "Mr. Hale, you may want to choose your words carefully today." Ethan rolled his eyes, but a flicker of discomfort crossed his face. The judge entered, and everyone stood. The room grew quiet. Claire's pulse quickened. She gripped her hands together tightly. Henry placed a reassuring hand on the table. "Case of Ethan Hale versus Claire Morgan," the judge announced, scanning the room. "We have multiple matters to address today, including a sealed file left by the petitioner's late father." Ethan straightened in his seat. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe that file contains evidence my wife has been hiding assets." Melanie elbowed him proudly. Claire kept her eyes forward. The judge nodded to Henry. "Mr. Wallace, you may present the file." Henry stepped forward and placed the large sealed envelope on the table. The embossed seal looked heavier than ever. Ethan leaned forward eagerly. "Finally," he muttered. "Let's see what the princess has been hiding." Melanie whispered loudly, "Maybe she stashed money in a secret account." Grace's voice chimed in from the gallery behind them. Claire hadn't even realized she had arrived. "Check everything," Grace said sharply. "She's been sneaky from the start." Claire stared ahead, her heart pounding. Grace's tone was familiar, entitled, certain, hungry. Hungry for something that never belonged to her. The judge raised a hand. "Before we open anything, we need to address preliminary matters." Ethan slumped back. "What preliminary matters? She doesn't have anything." Henry spoke before the judge responded. "Your Honor, we would like to submit evidence regarding Mr. Hale's financial conduct, including withdrawals from the joint account." Ethan's head snapped up. "That's irrelevant." "It is entirely relevant," Henry said calmly, "especially given the accusations Mr. Hale is making." Melanie folded her arms. "He didn't do anything wrong. She's dramatic." Claire glanced back at them. Ethan looked defensive. Melanie looked annoyed. Grace looked anxious, clutching her purse like it contained her last hope. The judge held up a hand. Enough. I will review everything, but first we proceed with the unsealing of the file. Claire's breath caught. She felt the room shrink around her. Everything her father had hidden, everything he had tried to protect, everything Ethan believed he was entitled to. Henry leaned close. Remember what I said. Breathe. She nodded, her fingers tightening on the edge of the table. The judge reached for the envelope. Ethan leaned forward again, eager, confident, convinced that today was the day he would win everything he thought he deserved. Melanie squeezed his arm. Grace whispered under her breath, "Finally." Claire stared at the seal, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The judge lifted the envelope. Ethan grinned. Melanie smirked. Grace sat forward. Claire held her breath. The judge broke the seal cleanly, the sound sharp enough to make the entire courtroom fall silent. Ethan leaned so far forward his chair creaked. Melanie shifted nervously, her hand slowly slipping from his arm. Grace gripped the back of the bench in front of her like she needed it to stay upright. The judge removed the contents of the envelope, flipped through the pages, and his eyebrows lifted almost immediately. Ethan grinned. "See? I told you she was hiding something." But the judge's expression didn't match Ethan's confidence. If anything, his face hardened with each page he read. Henry watched calmly, hands folded. Claire held her breath, unable to move. Finally, the judge looked up. "Mr. Hale," he said, "you claimed your wife was hiding assets. You insisted this file would prove that." "Exactly," Ethan said, sitting straighter. "So, what did she hide?" The judge read from the first page. "This file contains a detailed breakdown of Claire Morgan's inheritance from her late father." Grace's mouth fell open. "Inheritance?" Melanie blinked. "Wait, what?" The judge continued. "It includes multiple trusts, a controlling share in Morgan Holdings, several investment portfolios, and assets totaling," he paused, glancing at Ethan, "well over $200 million. The room erupted in a gasp. Ethan's face drained of color. Melanie's hand dropped from his arm as if burned. Grace stood up, so fast her purse fell to the floor with a thud. "She's lying!" Grace shouted. "That can't be true! She doesn't own anything! She barely has a working car!" The judge banged his gavel. "Sit down, Mrs. Hale." But Grace didn't sit. She stumbled backward into her seat, her face twisted in disbelief. Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, this isn't right. She would have told me." The judge ignored him, turning another page. "Your father's will is clear, Mrs. Morgan, and so is the clause he included." He read aloud, voice steady. "In the event of divorce, neither Ethan Hale nor any member of his family is entitled to a single dollar, asset, share, or benefit tied to Claire Morgan's estate." Grace gasped again, louder this time. Melanie whispered, "Ethan, oh my God." Ethan sat frozen, blinking hard like the truth was too much for his mind to accept. "But no, that's impossible. She's Claire." Claire finally turned to look at him. His face was the same face that laughed at her, mocked her, belittled her, told her he would give her a ride home. Now it was hollow, stunned, stripped of every ounce of arrogance. The judge continued. "Additionally, the will states that this inheritance was intentionally concealed until the marriage dissolved. Mr. Morgan did not trust the groom or the groom's family." A ripple of shock moved across the courtroom. Ethan shot to his feet. "He didn't trust me? Why? I didn't—" Henry cut in, voice calm but sharp. "Mr. Hale, shall we review the evidence? The drained joint account, the communications between you and your mistress, the coordinated attempt between you and your mother to manipulate Claire into signing financial documents." Melanie flinched. Grace's face turned white. Ethan sputtered. That has nothing to do with—" "It has everything to do with it," Henry said. You attempted financial abuse, you acted in bad faith, and you did so against the heiress of a major corporation. Whispers filled the room. Ethan's jaw trembled. You're twisting things. Henry opened the thick binder he'd brought. Your Honor, we submit bank statements documenting unauthorized withdrawals, private messages proving extramarital affairs, and testimony of public humiliation carried out by Mr. Hale against his wife. The judge reviewed the pages quickly, expression growing darker. Ethan grabbed Melanie's hand, but she pulled away. I didn't know she was rich, she whispered, horrified. Ethan, I thought she was broke. Ethan stared at her helplessly. I didn't know either. Melanie stood up. I'm not doing this. I'm not getting dragged into this mess. She walked out, just like that. Ethan watched her go in disbelief. Melanie, wait! She didn't. Grace stumbled to her feet. Your Honor, there must be something. Claire is lying. She must be. The judge cut her off sharply. Mrs. Hale, do not say another word. Grace collapsed into her seat, covering her face. The judge turned back to Claire. Mrs. Morgan, we will now determine the outcome of the divorce settlement. Ethan opened his mouth, but the judge didn't give him a chance. It is the ruling of this court that Claire Morgan retains full ownership of all personal and inherited assets. Furthermore, Ethan Hale is ordered to repay every dollar he withdrew from the joint account. Ethan's jaw dropped. Repay? I don't have that money. That, the judge said firmly, is your problem. Henry rested a hand on Claire's shoulder. It's over, he whispered. Ethan staggered forward, voice cracking. Claire, wait! Talk to me! You knew? You knew all along? Claire turned to him for the first time with clear, calm eyes. No, Ethan, I didn't know. Then how could you let this happen? How? She asked quietly. You cheated. You humiliated me. You stole from me. You tried to break me. And now you want kindness? No. Ethan stared at her like he didn't recognize her. Grace, he said, turning desperately to his mother, do something. Grace stood shakily, trying to gather herself. Claire, honey, listen, we were confused. Things got out of hand. We didn't... Claire walked right past her. No, she said coldly. You don't get to talk to me now. Grace's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She sank into the bench looking smaller than Claire had ever seen her. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt different. Warm, clean, new. Ethan followed Claire out the doors, calling after her. Please, you can't leave like this. We can work something out. But for the first time, Claire didn't stop. She didn't look back, not once. Henry caught up to her with the final document in hand. Your father kept one last message for you, he said, handing her a folded page. Claire opened it slowly. In her father's handwriting were the words, I never trusted him. I trusted you. She swallowed hard. Henry said gently, Your father left you more than money. He left you control of everything he built. Claire held the letter close. It hurt, but it also healed. Weeks later, Claire founded a support group for women facing financial abuse and manipulation. She didn't advertise her wealth. She didn't announce her inheritance. She simply helped quietly, one woman at a time. Lydia apologized again and again. Claire forgave her, but their closeness never returned to what it was. Some wounds healed with distance. One morning, Claire looked out the window of her new office, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. She finally understood something important. Some people love you for what they think you can give them. Walk away before they try to own you.